Good afternoon and welcome to our next webinar, Unlocking Valuable Content Through Structured Content Creation. This is the first in a series of webinars that we're going to be doing on smarter content. And so we're looking forward to this session, and there's going to be two more afterwards as well. Joining me today will be James Kenwood, Senior Customer Success Manager, and Martin van Vulpen. I hope I pronounced that right. Customer Success Manager at Fonto. So just to contextualize what we're going to be talking about today, employees spend on average, and it says 1.8 hours every day, 9.3 hours per week on average, searching and gathering for information. I certainly know I do a lot of that in my role, and I'm sure James and Martin do as well. And that's really because of the shape of the information in the organizations. It's really to do with that unstructured barrier that can be in organizations. You might have structured data in Power BI, in Tableau, and you've been using it for a long time. But unstructured forms of data can come in many different shapes and forms, and sometimes it's difficult to get those into a system. These are some stats from IDC around, reasons why these barriers exist. Mostly, only 26% of unstructured data is automatically captured and processed, with a third, almost a third, just over a third, partly automated. So people using software to augment the analysis of unstructured data and pull out the structured data, the text that might be in there. But most of the work that's done with unstructured data is manual. And that is an increasing cost to business because the growth in unstructured data is only going to continue. There's some inhibitors of why this is in business. And it comes down to really like the understanding of the value that's inside your unstructured data, your content, your documents, the information that doesn't quite fit neatly into rows and columns. And so, that's part of the challenge in the business, is to really show how you can extract value from unstructured data, not just in terms of processing times and getting it into the system, but also the insights that you can get out of it. I talked about unstructured data growing, and it is going to continue to grow. 80% of new data pipelines being built for data in 2024 will be about ingesting, processing, and storing unstructured data. This is from Forrester in 2023, and I hazard a guess that quite a large percentage of that is down to getting AI to be able to understand that unstructured data, but also other systems in your business trying to leverage contract information, say for instance, or field reports that might be in Word or some other unstructured document. So what we're saying is there are better ways of doing business because it's locked in your data. We're going to try and unlock it for you. We're going to show you across the 3 sessions how to do that, how to leverage your unstructured data, how to search across it, how to extract facts, classify things. But what we're really looking at is ways of monetizing legacy and new content in new ways, enabling your content, your unstructured strategy to grow, augment BI to answer questions about your content, your unstructured data, and make the most of the investments that you're making in AI at the moment. This can also help improve your compliance operations because you've got greater visibility of your data. Increase the time that your audience spends on site, so that you can create personalized and better experiences for consumers when they're viewing your content, and increase that human efficiency and focus on then key business initiatives rather than trying to focus on getting your data into a system, into a way of making it machine not only readable but interpretable. So these are the three events we've got. We've got create, enrich, and deliver. It's going to go across June, July, and September. We're going to be putting out lots of content around this time as well. But this is really about what is smarter content, and then taking that through the journey to then smarter content use cases across the three individual pillars that you have here. So our first session today is going to be on smarter content, how content formats are evolving, structured creation of content, simplifying writing and editing of XML documents with Fonto, and how MarkLogic and Semaphore can help unlock that value. We hope to demonstrate that with some smarter content use cases. And like I say, we'll be going over the other two in July and September. So please do register for those when they're available. If you have any questions for our panelists today, if you'd like to ask anything of them, then please do feel free to reach out. Click on the right-hand side of your screen there. You'll have a little hand symbol that you can ask a question, and we'll make sure to get through to as many of those as we can at the end. If we overrun slightly because we've got a lot of content today, then we'll keep going with the Q&A and try and answer as many questions. But if we don't get to yours, then we'll make sure to reach out to you and go from there. So with that, it's over to James, and he's going to take you through structured content creation in the context of smarter content. James, it's over to you.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, as Phil mentioned, my name is James Kenwood. I'm Senior Customer Success Manager here at MarkLogic. And I've been with MarkLogic about 5 years in this role. And before that, I was Engineering Director at Pearson, so working in the publishing and content creation space. What I wanted to really start with today is the age-old adage of bad data in is bad data out. For all of the talk of magic AI, I think this still holds as true as it has ever done. If you want quality results, you have to have good quality foundational data to feed into those next generation applications. We've all heard about the hallucinations that Gen AI can throw up. I think a particularly relevant one was quite recent with Google's move into AI search that was encouraging people to put glue into their pizzas, which was not great, even though it was supposed to stop the cheese falling off. This amazingly inappropriate advice came from a single post on Reddit that the AI thought would be relevant. And that really, again, comes back to that bad data in, bad data out. Today's, what I think we really want to talk about is how are we going to use the content that you've got in your repository. That isn't unregulated Reddit data. This is good quality content that's well respected in your field. And we want to talk about how we can enrich that to help deliver these new experiences going forward. And we also mustn't lose sight of the value of that IP. So in the rush to get this content out and push into new generation applications and to AI, we want to make sure that it's secured and well protected as well. And that'll be something we touch on later on in the other series. So what do we mean when we're talking about smarter content and this content evolution? You know, many content creators have already gone through some pretty seismic shifts. You know, we've moved from paper layout to digital. We've moved from paper consumption to digital with the move to PDFs and web pages. But what we're really seeing and what our customers are really pushing for us is to move their content from storing it in a repository like MarkLogic in the XML and making that searched as keyword search, to really moving it around to the right-hand side here, where we're starting to get semantic meaning behind the content and making it machine interpretable, so systems can talk to systems and start to understand the context and content. And by chunking that content into smaller parts and enriching it, we can really start to drive the next wave of next generation applications. So in today's session, what we're really going to cover is the creating and editing of content in a more structured way, which helps you begin this process of creating smarter content. And then, as Phil mentioned, in the next section, we're going to look at enrichment, and then we're going to look at next gen applications. So what is smarter content? Smarter content really is about the process of taking unstructured text and layering on additional information. Adding more metadata and more context means more understanding. And the more understanding and knowledge you can put onto your content, the more insight and wisdom that you can gain from it. So if we consider the atomy of smarter content, we're really looking at how we can take a larger piece of content and break it down into smaller elements and to enrich it with metadata. So in this example, typically it would be a chapter from a book. It's got a title, it's got some authors, it's got some basic metadata around it. It might be ISBNs or whatever IDs that you're using. And then you'd have had a whole big chapter of unstructured text behind it. And what we're doing with smarter content is we're actually breaking that down into smaller elements that are focused around particular learning objects or learning tasks. And then aligning that to the concepts that are perhaps coming from an ontology or a taxonomy, so you can very clearly classify the content that you've got created in these chunks. And then the next thing is taking those chunks and all of that metadata and all of those concepts, and then looking at how we can relate them together. So you might have multiple versions as you're working through an article. You might have different language versions. You might have different subjects and concepts linked to it. And the author who's authoring it might have different articles that they've written. So it's all about building this knowledge graph of connections and relationships between your content. And all of that comes together to create a really rich example of chunked content with lots of metadata that can then help power these new applications. So one thing that I thought we'd touch on is an actual real life customer story. This customer has received much benefit from their smarter authoring system and consider it quite a competitive advantage in what they've done. So we're not allowed to give their name, or we're not allowed to give too much detail about what they've done, but this is a high level take on what we're allowed to share. This particular customer works in a regulatory compliance area. And what they were trying to do is they research lots of information on lots of different applications, lots of different websites. And then a particular person will gather some of that research together, author some content around a particular piece of regulatory compliance, and send that out to a customer. And they've got thousands of employees all doing the same thing, lots of replication, lots of duplication. Content goes on the CMS and isn't tagged and gets lost, so everyone starts and does it all over again. And it's impossible to know who sent what information to whom. It just gets sent out on email and everyone comes and goes and different people join the company. So it's very difficult to trace what was sent to where. So what they did is they brought in a more smarter content approach using MarkLogic, Fonto, and Semaphore to be able to author content into smaller chunks, assign semantic meaning to it and classification, and then bring that together into chunks that they can then use for their guided authoring. So being able to take those chunks and very quickly, as you're doing your research, find a chunk that's been used, bring that into the document, and then you've saved your time, your effort in not only research, but also putting that content into the distribution to the customer. And because all of this is data driven and it's all coming from a database, we can track where that data is being created and then where it's being published to. So we know which customers have received which advice, so that when the advice changes, we know exactly who to reach out to offer them the new information as the regulation changes, which is a really lovely service and is a really nice thing to receive, that the customer or it's a nice thing to receive because the organization that's sending you the content understands what they've sent you and can correct it as it needs to. everything that I wanted to go through today. So what I will do is I will hand on to Martin from Fonto. Martin, over to you.
Thank you, James. And indeed, we fully agree on what you mentioned before. At Fonto, we also think that that structured approach has so much power. And although we are already in the field for a few years, there's so much to win still, going away from the traditional document approach into a data approach. At Fonto, we also say we make it easy for everyone to create, edit, review, and publish structured content. Or even easier, I always say, even my mom should be able to contribute to XML documents without knowing the fact that she's working actually on XML. My name is Maarten van Vulpen. You almost pronounced it correct, Phil. I don't blame you for that. It's quite a difficult Dutch name. I'm working as what we call Partner and Customer Success Manager at Fonto. Fonto is part of the RWS group of companies since 2022. We founded the company back in 2012, and we have a full focus on providing the solution to create structured content, all XML based, all different kind of formats. But then the actual question is, what is structured content? A very good and relevant definition is coming from Wikipedia. It defines structured content as being the information that's organized in a predictable way, usually classified with metadata. XML is the common storage format, but it can also be in other standards or even proprietary formats. To make that easier to understand, we always use this graphic definition where you see on the left-hand side the more document approach. You have just a set of information like a traditional Word document. In a structured content approach, it's cut down in smaller components. These components could be on a paragraph level, could be on a chapter level, but we even see that it's almost on the Word itself level. So the smaller you structure your elements, the better you can reuse it in the future as well. Advantages of structured content in our approach are, on the one hand side, efficient authoring. Just by cutting down information into smaller pieces, which, for example, need to be reviewed and approved by a legal department within a company, can be easily controlled when they are being used in other documents. When information is stored in a repository like MarkLogic, you still can track where all these small components do appear and also which versions you have of it. Compare that to the Word approach where you just can copy and paste and you don't know which versions of the document are living somewhere in your organization or how people are using parts of the document within other documents. On the other hand, we see also document automation, documents that are automatically produced out of the smaller components that are already part of your data set. And still that output can then be in a traditional format. For example, see submissions for medical products. These still need to be done in the traditional formatted ways, but we see that more and more life sciences companies are moving into a structured approach and trying to cut their information, chunk it in smaller elements, which they can reuse for multiple submissions. And on the other hand, it's also digital output. Organizations can work in other formats than just documents. For example, apps, software, machine readable content, which can be automatically being interpreted by applications that then automatically calibrate themselves based upon information that come from a structured source. The key drivers here, James also mentioned it, but it's good to repeat, are efficiency, adding value, and being compliant. And of course, it depends a bit on the industry you're in. One of these drivers could be the core driver for you, but if we compare all the industries we're working in as Fonto, we see that those three drivers are really the key drivers, and always being in control, know where your content is living, and making use of content elements which you can always track instead of copied, reused information. That's really key here, and that's also one of the big advantages going into a structured way. And as already mentioned, also feeding AI, if you still can track where data is coming from, and it's your own data, you will get much more valuable answers with a higher reliability. When you look at the positioning of Fonto itself, we're just part of your whole chain. Fonto itself doesn't store any data, therefore rely on a CCMS or a repository. MarkLogic is a good example, and also we work with partners, shared partners like SiteFusion, that have created end-to-end solutions that contain both MarkLogic and Fonto together with a workflow. And then Fonto is always the part in which you can really edit and create your content yourself. And of course, on the left-hand side, you see the Fonto editor. It still feels really like a word processor, and that's also what we take into account. Stay as close as possible to the word processor experience that someone is familiar to. That's something people can start using without almost no training. And therefore, I'm more than happy to also share a bit of the Fonto authoring interface to make sure that you get a better understanding of how Fonto works and how it might also help you to move into that structured content creation world. What you see here is the Fonto editor itself. It just runs in the web browser. We make use of the web browser as the framework to present you the software. It doesn't require to be on the web. It can be within an on-premise hosted environment, the intranet, whatsoever, as long as it's connected to your repository. And what we see here is a configuration that's specifically configured for the DIDA scheme. Reason we choose this is because DIDA is one of the foundational XML schemes that's heavily being used within TechDoc and publishing, and those markets are really the basis for structured content authoring. That's also where Fonto has its heritage, although over the years we've seen moving the structured approach into more and more industries, which we of course also cover. One of the big advantages is that within Fonto, we do real-time validation against your XML scheme. So you see the navigation bar here with a lot of buttons that are currently grayed out. I'm in the title here, and for example, I'm not allowed, according to the scheme, to insert a list here. When I go into the topic itself and I'm in the topic title, I'm still not allowed to insert that list. But when I jump down into the content of the topic, I can insert a list here. And to prove that it's actually XML, here you also see the XML under the hood. So if I insert a list item, you see a new list item is being created, and then by just pressing enter, the additional lines for the second item are being created. But when I want to indent my list, pressing the tab item, it automatically creates that valid XML, and still it's real-time validated against the scheme. So what's allowed, what's not allowed. This also guarantees that information that's being used in upstream processes is always valid at any given moment. And of course, this again, this XML view makes it really technical. It's something that we see is often being hidden within customer implementations because their subject matter experts do not really care about the right-hand side of the window. They care about what's on the left-hand side. So pressing enter again will give me the ability to insert another item, and pressing enter twice, I go back to the highest level. It's all the behavior just like you see in your word processors, although under the hood, it's all that structured information. What's important, and also already mentioned by James, you can also add additional metadata. Of course, you can do it in the technical way, like you see it here, choosing specific properties to add them to a paragraph, or on the higher level, the body of the topic itself, and identify them here. But again, this makes it technical. What we've tried to make it easier is with a tool called Fonto Content Quality, and that's more or less spell checker on steroids. Content quality is just an add-on, and as you see here on the screen, you see some underlines, you see some squiggles below the text, and when I open my content quality check, it just provides me with feedback which I can easily apply to my content. And of course, spell checker is one of them, but you can also create a connection to your internal repository, or have a tool like Semaphore doing suggestions for you. In this case, we have a topic that contains information on pharmaceutical products, and the names of these products are here. And of course, it's currently just a paragraph of text, but for reuse over multiple applications, machine readable or better interpretable information, it's good to tag these items and link them, in this case, to their national drug code list references. So it's again just pressing tag, and as you can see in the XML under the hood, there's an output class for the pharmaceutical product rendered around it. It contains all the information and the reference to, in this case, the national drug code list. This can be any custom dictionary, it can be any system. So again, tools like Semaphore play a big role here, suggesting information, and can also work two ways around, that people can add additional tags into your repository, and on the other hand, suggest it again as being a relevant item to link. And why is this important? We see use cases like, for example, from that pharmaceutical world again, recognizing both combinations of quantity of measurement, a unit of measurement, and the name of a pharmaceutical product, and that all together will be a dosage form. So in this case, we can tag it, and again, you really add structure to your information. Of course, it requires some configuration up front, but then, like I said, my mom can do all the work here, and that content quality API really provides that bridging between your repository, the data you already have internally, and the authoring tool Fonto Editor itself. think of it like that spell checker, and when you start typing, you will get your suggestions automatically. So that's real-time information, and the better quality there's in your database, the better responses you get. And the same works, of course, with data that's just being checked according to, for example, a formal way of writing being completely correct according to the tone of voice that you're using within your company or within your publication. We work a lot in cases where multiple authors are involved in the whole publication process. And of course, if you really go over the chapters or even the paragraphs within a certain chapter, you can see, hey, this has been written by author X, while author Y wrote this piece. And these kind of conflicts can even be terminated by tools like content quality and connections to your preferred way of writing and have them in place. But most important is that you chunk your content again into smaller pieces of data, like a paragraph which contains some name of pharmaceutical products or products in general, linking them to the smaller structured elements that you have in place within your repository. And already mentioned the pharmaceutical world. It's really a world where they see the big benefits of creating structured information. We're working on a project where we unfortunately cannot mention the name of the client, but on average, they do 5 submissions of products per year, and their scientists have per product on average 800 days of automatable work. So we're going into a more structured, automated document creation process will definitely save them work. With the first setup we're currently doing, we see already an increase of around 35%, and that's going up to 60-70% since we're using that same information for a second product. And there really are the benefits for structured content authoring, because it saves both on the side of quality. Important is that information that once have been approved can be stored as a certain version within the repository, and that version can be reused once there are updates created to that version. It's again submitted for review, but at the moment that information is just approved and signed off. It can be used and really saves time, because not the whole document has to go to a review cycle, but it can be all done on that structured component level. And giving an example of that, it's also working with combinations of documents where you can work with variables combined with other data that comes from your repository, store that as a certain version. Already mentioned that the output still can be a traditional format. What we here see is an informed consent form. That informed consent form contains a lot of information that's in most cases the same, although the company, the treatment, and the disease are the variables here, and they change, and all the rest of the information that you get provided and which you have to sign off during that informed consent procedure is mostly the same. And of course, you can work with Word and have some variables defined here. But again, here you know exactly who signed off on what. When you go into the more international approach, where you work with translations or even jurisdictional limitations per country, it really can be checked and approved per country. and even the setup of the information can be different, and you still can keep track of it because it's all part of your structured content repository, and you can completely track where all these elements have been used, in which variation, and of course from an audit trail perspective also who approved at what time and which version had been sent out at a certain given moment. All these things are very hard or even impossible to track within the traditional document approach. As I already mentioned, structured content is being used within multiple industries. I'm just going over some examples to give you a better understanding of how it works. And as I already mentioned, technical documentation, that's really one of the foundations for structured content. TechDoc is really that sector where it all started together with publishing. Important examples, as you might see here, is, for example, information that's being used within manuals, which is being shared also over support portals, which is being used within even technical support systems. And although the data is exactly the same, the way it's represented can be different. In this case, it's a website versus a print, but it can also be machine readable information, which you go through a triage process in case you're having certain technical issues. On the other side, it's publishing. Within publishing, you see more and more personalized educational lines, depending on the level you're in, or even depending on what you did before. So if you failed a test on certain questions, you will receive additional questions or additional information, and all based upon metadata, all based upon the way that data is being stored within your repository. It can be reused within apps, within personalized learning environments, and still that information, if it's really well structured, again, it can be used from multiple purposes. And we see that those educational publishers are really making big advantages of this and really can speed up the process of getting their information to market, where the traditional book approach really slowed them down. And you now see that they are able to even include new content almost within days or weeks, running it through that structured approach and combining existing and new content just upon the way they've structured it. Also, within standards and regulatory content, there's a lot of benefit for the whole approach of working with structured information, where traditional documents had their references to clauses or chapters within other documents, which were updated and then got outdated. With a structured environment, you get more and more grip on what's actually going on, and even references can be created easily and can be dynamic ones instead of just those hard links that link and can get outdated over time. Example is, for example, ISO, that's working with Fonto as well. Within their standards, automatically the references to other standards are being recognized and then can be included. And also that's information that comes from their repository. Even clauses, if they get reordered, all the references will be updated automatically because all the information within it is a dynamic element. And that really speeds up the process. Even if you say, for example, a certain clause needs to be removed, in the traditional approach, you had to reorder all your information, take out all the references, but now these are automatically being updated. We also already touched upon the life sciences example. Could be a drug submission one. It could be also that informed consent form. It could be from the more regulatory perspective, but also from the clinical trial perspective, with a lot of data being involved. And the more data there is, the more often information is being reused, the higher the opportunity is. And so there are many, many examples where we see that structured content is really a big benefit to start with. And yes, sharing all these examples here might be maybe a bit too much, but at least we're highly engaged with all these examples and see a lot of opportunity for it. At least, I hope I inspired you a bit and took away that technical burden from the XML that needs to be there. I'm more than happy to take your questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. That was super interesting, and big lover of Fonto. I've used it in a previous life, and it's amazingly powerful. And I think we've got many customers that have already integrated Fonto and MarkLogic together. And I think, one of the reasons for that is that MarkLogic is a native XML database. So as you're creating your content in Fonto, you can be saving it directly back into MarkLogic. And we do all the version control. We can do check in and check out to make sure other people, aren't editing the file at the same time it's locked. So there's lots of benefits in MarkLogic. And because we're a native XML database, we understand the structure straight away. So as soon as you're saving your content into MarkLogic, it's searchable. You could search titles, body text, whatever you need, even without creating any indexes. MarkLogic is ready for it. So it's a really good comparative tool to go with Fonto. We have industry-leading search. We can integrate with Data Hub. And I think Martin was talking about having all of the variables and all of the information behind it. MarkLogic is really powerful at giving you that data layer that can help drive the smart content in your structured content. The other thing we touched on was Progress Semaphore. So Semaphore allows you to create all of those ontologies, those knowledge models that you have in your business, and then you can connect those to Fonto as well, as you saw. So you can actually start to enrich your content as you're authoring it and make it very rich, searchable, and powerful and usable straight away in the authoring process. But also, and we'll touch on this in the subsequent sessions, we can use Semaphore at scale to actually classify your existing content. So all of that legacy content that you've got locked up today in your repository, using Semaphore, we can classify that at scale for you. And we'll be talking about that more in the next session. So with that, where have we got to? I think we've understood that smarter content is all about taking your content, making it into smaller chunks and enriching it with that metadata. And with the power of Fonto and MarkLogic and Semaphore, you've got all of the tools needed to allow you to do that. And as we say in the next session, we'll talk about how you can enrich that further and all the things that Semaphore and MarkLogic can build to help you create those knowledge graphs going forward.
Oh, sorry, James, I cut you off there. Apologies about that. Right, gentlemen, if you want to turn back on your cameras and join me for the Q&A, we'll get started. And we'll just wait for Martin. There is Martin. There we go. Perfect. Great. Right. Well, thank you very much, Martin and James, for presenting there. Really interesting. I can already imagine some use cases that even outside of what you discussed there, the comprehensive sort of overview. But yeah, no, it's really, really good. Few questions that have come through, so let's kick those off. Why would you use a structured authoring over, say, like something like Word? maybe Martin, you could take that one.
Thanks. I think it's definitely a good question because Word feels simple, although keeping track of your information and even more of the reuse of your information, that's already an advantage, having your information stored as a small component within a repository. Besides that, also the whole process of getting your data signed off and reuse it in multiple formats is something that you cannot achieve through Word, but which you can achieve once you store it as a component within a database or repository. So that's definitely one of the big advantages. And I think a disadvantage for a lot of people there might be the assumption that it becomes technical, although if you put a less technical interface on top of it, like Fonto, it can help that you still have the idea I'm creating a Word-alike information element, although under the hood it's definitely structured.
Yeah, it's a really clever way of abstracting that XML work that organizations have had to do in the past and making it more accessible for not just data people, but also the line of business people that are in there. So it's really clever bit of software. One of the questions was, when we move into structured content, what level of structure is sufficient to kind of get value out of that? Martin, what would you say to that?
Yeah, of course, the more the better, although you should definitely not try to overdo it. Of course, first question always is, how do you want to make use of that information? What's the purpose of the information itself? Is it being reused? Need it be interpreted by machines? Then, of course, the more structure added, the better. But yeah, if it's, for example, regulatory clauses, then more important is that you keep track of the changes that are being made and references to other clauses. And then a reference might be a separate element, although still the clause itself on its own could be an element as well. And if it contains those references or maybe names of countries or counties whatsoever within it, that might be an element, but all the rest of the content can just stay text like a paragraph in Word, so to say. Yeah. Don't overdo it.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of try and get your MVP going first, and then start building on top of that and iterating from there. And James, this is a question I guess to you: is if Fonto can work with any backend, why am I going to choose MarkLogic?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we sort of touched on it in the session, but it's really about the fact that MarkLogic is an XML native database. It's where we started. So as you're working on that content, it's all being put directly into MarkLogic, which not only means that you can version it and check in, check out, those kind of things, but it's available immediately in your system for search, for action, for use. You know, you're getting that content in front of people as quickly as possible. You can, put metadata around it to check on workflow status, publishing, who you published it to. It becomes a very powerful partner to Fonto. And then as you bring in Semaphore, then we add even more power to it.
Yeah, you're creating a data platform for that unstructured content.
Absolutely.
Which kind of brings me into the next question, which I'll take, and then maybe others can answer. But what role can AI play in the process of structured content creation? So Martin, if you want to take this, and then I'll maybe round it off with just a view from us.
Yes, definitely. And of course, one of the ways is the processing of, for example, I mentioned it also as one of the examples during my presentation, but the tone of voice kind of stuff. So make it really content that is suitable and seem to be in line with the company's tone of voice instead of all those individual authors. On the other hand, also the example of the recognition of entities like pharmaceutical products or references to clauses in publications, references to other publications. And of course, you can say these are just queries to a database, but it can also be AI that already does a suggestion for you. You mentioned this reference, so automatically suggest it in your content. And yeah, of course, if you have certain templates in place, those already can be pre-filled so that the author more becomes an editor that needs to recheck the content instead of starting from scratch anytime based upon the kind of document, based upon information that's already available within the organization.
Yeah. Yeah, and I you know, I mentioned I'd round this off, and we've been testing AI with both products, SmartLogic and Severable, and in a combination with them, and creating what we're calling RAG, or retrieval augmented generation. And customers that have done this work, and you saw one that James discussed earlier on, have able to introduce AI to these types of applications very, very quickly. So there was one customer, again, joint SmartLogic and Semaphore customer, that was able to do this in 4 weeks. They were able to introduce a production-ready AI assistant. And it's because they've done the underlying work that James has talked about and Martin's talked about in getting your data structured, connecting your data semantically, bringing your data into a knowledge model of your business, of your industry. And it's a really interesting time for this. The other use case where you might use AI in the process of structuring your content is in the creation of those synonyms or connections within your data. You can query the LLM with your data and say, can you find any concepts in here that would be relevant to this type of query or this type of data? One of our colleagues tested it, and he was able to find 800 concepts in these legal documents. He was able to attribute 800 concepts in a day. So it can really accelerate the creation of the semantically linked data of that knowledge model of your business, so that you can apply that to your data creation process downstream as well. So there's loads of different ways that you can leverage the technology, especially if you've gone through this process.
Yeah, and I'd say for anyone on the call, keep an eye out for the third in the series. The third video, the third meeting we're going to have will go very much on how we use all of this content that we've created, enriched in a Gen AI environment. It's the talk of town, so let's show you how you can use it.
Yeah, and Martin, we've got a question here about unstructured content. Can that be used in Fonto?
It depends, of course, a bit on the kind of content, but take for example, a Word document, that's something you can definitely work with depending on the scheme and the configuration of Fonto you can do, or an import, or just copy and paste it. And start from there. So you start with your unstructured information, and then you can add structure to it. For example, what we saw with the content quality tool that will be automatically applied once that file is in the editor, and when there are options to optimize or add additional structures to your information, you can do so.
Yeah, I really like that that content tool, that the guided authoring process. I think that's really useful to a lot of different use cases. I can think of maybe support queries where they want to show where you get the information from, and it automatically brings those things in and things like that. So it's a really powerful tool. Somebody's asking, what's the relationship between structured content and like schemas? Can you kind of explain that?
Yes, happy to take that one. The schema is more or less the definition on the information, how you allow the information to be stored, and what the relationship is also between all the elements. If we go back to the example of a publication or a traditional Word file where you have a title, where you have your paragraphs, within DIDA, this is something that's been defined as a topic, and a topic can have a title. That title can have sub-elements, like being something bold or italic, but it doesn't allow, for example, to be a list item. A paragraph can be in there, and yeah, all the relationships and the hierarchy are defined within the schema. The schema is also in place to make such information better understandable by all the upstream processes. So, for example, if you are going to use it in other tools, they can automatically interpret and, for example, add certain behavior to certain information, for example, link elements that come from the repository, or query it and add higher relevance when you do a search action if something is being tagged as an important topic or subject within the topic, for example.
Yeah, for me, I think it's the guide rails, isn't it? It allows you to control what you can and can't do with that content, whereas Word's a bit of a, it's a free-for-all. You can put a table in a title if you want to, but it gives you those guardrails to know that you're making great quality content or great structured content that can drive a web app, an LLM, whatever you want it to be, but you know the quality of what you're getting is secured. And with something like Fonto, it's enforcing that in a very nice way to make sure that the quality you get at the end of it when you save that document is 100%.
And maybe James, you can answer this one as well as Martin, but how do authors get comfortable with this technology?
Yeah, I think it depends on the way you approach it. There are, as you saw in Martin's demo, lots of things, lots of additional technologies that we can present them, and lots of things we can do to make their life a little easier when we're creating references and citations and links. All of those things are extra effort when you're doing it in Word, where they can be data driven and easier to do in Fonto. But I think it's also, there are, it's just a way of presenting the information to the author and giving them extra access to information, drag and drop things in. If we talked earlier around that guided authoring, if I'm trying to author in something, I could do it from scratch every time, or I could have a side panel that's, doing a search and give me all of the elements that I might want to be able to very quickly reuse, drag them in, and just enrich them and rewrite them as I want to. So I think it depends on the way you approach it. But Martin, you've got probably more access and more knowledge in that area.
Of course, it depends mostly on the business purpose. If you just want to create a rapidly one single document that's just for individual purposes, of course, that's quite limited. But if information needs to be approved, if there's an audit trail required, that's all information that you can add there. If, for example, you want to control where all the elements are being used, also business requirement, it becomes more and more relevant and important to move into that structured direction. And we really see those benefits in the highly regulated industries, for example, where they're really at the forefront of making that move into a structured content authoring, and still stay, or at the moment stay, with quite traditional monolithic documents which are being used. Think about a core data sheet in life sciences, which is managed within Excel or stuff like that, and then being referenced from a Word document. I think all of us agree that there are opportunities there.
Yeah, I mean, it is really interesting. Once we've had customers go through this journey, we go back and ask them, what has this done to your business? We have one customer that said it saves every single one of our employees at least 2 hours a week. and that was from them. This whole process of doing this, going through guided authoring, and 2 hours a week, however many employees you have, it starts to add up to significant savings to the business. So there's not just that guided authoring, that structured way of doing it, making your data more extensible for other downstream applications, not just authoring, but other things as well. But I think it's that real business benefit to organizations that you can realize once you've gone through this smarter content journey. We've reached the top of the hour. We have one more question, which was, will this recording be available afterwards? Yes, it will. We'll make sure that it goes up live on our MarkLogic YouTube channel. So check that out when this goes. It should go live hopefully either tomorrow or Monday, depending on how busy the team is backstage. But yeah, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and for putting your presentations together. Thank you, Martin, for joining us and for giving me your name pronunciation. I'm not going to butcher it again. But join us next time, where we'll be looking at how we can enrich your content with Semaphore, again with more use cases. We're hoping to have a customer, I think, come and join us as well, about telling them about their experience in this field. And obviously then check out the new event that will be in September as well, where we'll be discussing these next generation applications, including generative AI in this process. But gentlemen, thank you for your time. Thank you, audience, for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers. Bye.